Following their migrations, the Aryans are going to establish small kingdoms throughout the subcontinent in India after 1500 BC. The rulers of these kingdoms fought amongst themselves and sought to expand their states. But by the 6th century BC, wars of expansion resulted in the consolidation of large regional powers that dominated much of the subcontinent. Despite strenuous efforts, none of them were able to establish a hegemony over these other peoples. During the classical era, the Mauryan and Gupta dynasties founded centralized imperial states that embraced much of India, but neither lasted very long to establish centralized rule. The unification of India came about as a result from intrusion from outside. Around 520 BC, the Persian emperor Darius I crossed the Hindu Kush Mountains, conquered parts of northwestern India, and created a province in northern Pakistan and southern Afghanistan for his Persian Empire. The establishment of Persian authority introduced local rulers to Persian techniques of administration. In 327, Alexander of Macedon crosses the Indus River. Alexander did not make a deep impression of the Punjabi people, yet he created a political vacuum in northwestern India by destroying the existing states and withdrawing his forces. Poised to fill this vacuum is going to be the kingdom of Magadha, located in the central Ganges plain. By 500 BC, Magadha had emerged as the most important state within northeastern India. During the next 2 centuries, the kings of Magadha are going to conquer neighboring states and gain control of the Indian commerce through the Ganges Valley, as well as overseas trade passing by the Bay of Bengal. The withdrawal of Alexander from the Punjab is going to present Magadha with a rare opportunity to expand. During the late 320s BC, Chandragupta Maurya laid the foundation of the Mauryan Empire, the first centralized and unified government to rule over much of this Indian subcontinent. India is a very difficult place to unify due to its many peoples, competing regional states, communities, and cultures. Each of the region's ecological niches created a distinct society and culture. In the 8th and 7th century alone, BC, there were 600 to 700 different peoples in northern India. Each of them spoke either a separate language or dialect of Sanskrit. Each had its own social order. Chandragupta began by seizing control of the remote regions of Magadha and then worked his way to the center. This area had great natural resources, particularly water. The Ganges bequeathed sediment from the Himalayas to Magadha. The glaciers of the Himalayas allowed the Ganges to keep flowing, even in the driest months of the winter and pre-monsoon spring. Groundwater is in great abundance and not very deep underground. Southwest monsoons supplement this water from June to September. Furthermore, Magadha also historically suffered less from floods and fewer cyclones from Bay of Bengal. This plentiful water enabled Magadha farmers to produce not just 1 but 2 harvests of rice every year. Magadha could thus produce more grain to support a large population. Thus, Magadhan rulers can draw upon more resources than rival areas. Wet farmers, such as rice cultivators, were more willing to stay put because of the intense labor that rice requires, and they were willing to pay more taxes than growers of dry crops such as wheat. Magadha's rulers had extensive agricultural base to draw upon. More people meant more men available to serve, more tax revenue, and Magadha was able to have a professional army alongside its peasant soldiers. Magadha also had access to elephants, which could be used in warfare, in which our Indian armies were based upon and were symbols of power. It had access to vast quantities of iron, coal, and wood, which allowed Magadha to create metal goods and tools to trade on the market, generating wealth. The Mauryan family's origins are obscure, but consensus holds that Chandragupta's birth was of low status. He may have been the son of a king whose mother was either a low-ranking queen or concubine, and eventually overthrew his half-brothers to seize power. Other stories have him coming from a family of peacock herders, since his name means peacock. Chandragupta also benefited from the collapse of the Persian Empire by Alexander the Great. In 327 BC, Alexander crossed the Indus, and several Indian kings submitted to him. Alexander's men, however, refused to keep moving. Before turning west, Alexander established colonies which fostered trade and which could spread ideas, goods, and people. Magadha was at the eastern end of this network and prospered from it. Chandragupta was able to spread west through the political disorder that Alexander's invasion had caused. His rivals were fatally weakened, while Magadha was too far away to be weakened. He marched along the Indus and fought until 303 BC, when he came up against Seleucus, one of Alexander's successors. He managed a settlement with the Greek, marrying the Greek's daughter, and was able to rule as far away as Afghanistan in exchange for 500 elephants. Chandragupta would relinquish his throne after 20 years in 297. He became a Jain monk and ultimately fasted himself to death. Doing so, he burned off the karmic matter that he accumulated from the acts of violence that accompanied his rise to power and the expansion of his empire. His son, Bindusara, extended the Mauryan Empire to the east and to the south. Little is known about this man, and other than him being a very cultured person.